DJ. We are continuing down the this long and arduous path of world building with Dungeons and Dragons classes, and we are down with the fighter. Now we're using the list from 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Please check out the other videos that are in this series because we may refer back to them. And thank you everyone who's contributing so many comments to the videos. I know you can't be with us live and be part of the chat, but I do read all the comments. I am considering doing like a follow-up video. I could probably do it on Saturdays and just read all the comments and just answer them and talk to them that way. That way you don't feel like you're left out. So thank you very much. I know there are new people who are contributing comments to this world building series, and I think some people have found this channel through other methods, maybe through my reviews. And lastly, here from Critical Hit Publishing, of which I am a contributing writer. Critical Hit Publishing also has releases for Call of Cthulhu, which Vince, my co-host here, which he has not appeared yet, doesn't know about. We've released The Pipeline. And The Pipeline, along with some handouts for The Pipeline, is a Call of Cthulhu adventure. And these adventures are actually based on the beginnings of the Cinematic Environs, which are a release for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So the first one, The Pipeline, is about like the Arctic region. It's over 50 pages with handouts. It takes place in the 80s, going up into northern Canada in an oil rig, and you know, all kinds of brutality and insanity ensues from that. So check that out. I have completely forgot to do that, so I'll probably do a video for like a page through for that as well at some point in the future. Okay, I've talked a lot. Vince, my co-host, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Vincent Schein, also known as Johannes Einloft, depending on where you know me. I'm also a writer, and I want to join Critical Hit Publishing. I'm not sure if I've done yet, maybe, kinda, somehow. I hope I can contribute with these guys and maybe make the things more interesting and write a bit more so we have more stuff to review. And yeah.
Yeah,
I'm helping DJ with this little project here.
Oh man. Part of me, as someone suggested in one of the YouTube comments, is like, maybe we're linking some of these worlds to each other through time and or space. Like one of these worlds, it might exist as the precursor to another one, or something like that.
You could also say it's just one giant world and each one is a continent.
Yeah, which would be amazing. So, all right, let's get into it. We're going to talk about fighters, and again, I think like when you talk about stereotypes in world creation, yeah, this one. It seems on its surface to be the most boring element, yet if we just take a couple of moments to think about it, it might be one of the most dynamic. So I'm going to let Vince start because I've got a lot of ideas, but he already came up with something previously. We talked off the air yesterday. So yeah, take it away.
Because I already mentioned it, Sparta would be an obvious inspiration. I'm not sure if we could go this route, but I think we should take it as a real-life example because it's basically the most well-known warrior nation that ever existed, where basically like most people were warriors and fighters. So yeah, you have basically a base ground of slaves, and then the other guys are all fighters and fighting all the time and waging war and shit. My idea was a bit more leaning on the side of fighting styles, so that the world is dominated by giant fighting schools, which represent different styles or maybe weapons or maybe both. And they could be basically the cornerstone of the military might of this world. So you could have these giant schools which school like thousands of people at the same time, and then having giant cities built around them. And these are basically like the guards, they are the soldiers, they are the special forces, they are everything. and life revolves around these schools.
I mean, honestly, I really feel you in this one. Even with these, we can take a lot of real world examples from this, but just like you mentioned Sparta, I mean, some kingdoms have been known to be powerful because of their alliance or reliance on the type of warriors that exist there, right? We can take a look at, like, let's take a look at some pop culture. There are the Vikings TV show on History Channel. They're known to have a particular fighting style, the shield wall, that frontal, well protected shield wall with like the spears or battle axes that come through. And when they've traveled, countries that know what fighters are with you will become like intimidated simply by the fighting style of those that are going to come to attack their realm, right?
Yeah.
If they're known to be archers, it's like, it's the ones that were
the English
trained,
longbowman.
right? And to be a king and have an alliance with the shield bearers or the pikemen or the archers or the dagger runners or something. They could have all these like exotic names from the greatest warriors amongst them that simply by showing up might make, communities just go, you know what, we're just not even going to fight you. We're just, oh, you're the pikemen of the northern steppes. Never mind. We're just going to take our walls down, and we don't want anybody to die here. And I could just imagine all of society revolves around the warrior from age. As soon as they can grab a weapon, it's going to be put in their hand. And it may not be all swords, right? It would be based on that school. So it would be spears or daggers or crossbows or what have you, or the class of weapons they use, shield and sword, or it might be 2-weapon fighting or something. And so I very much feel like we're a society built around the fighter, where there might be training pits. There would be honor those who hold power that aren't in the military would at least have to have some military service. There might be a few that could slip through the cracks. For example, maybe a great fighter has like 5 children. So like, the 2 oldest join the military, the others join other secondary.
You could also just say that there are different castes, which the most important and the highest one is the fighter caste, and the others are basically there to provide for the fighters, because you still need people who provide food, and there are other things you need besides fighters. Because
Right.
if you train all day, you can't take care of cooking, you can't take care of sewing, you can't take care of cleaning and all these things, and you basically have to have some kind of servant class.
And how the people react to that lifestyle would be some of our interactions, right? I mean, for example, there might be great honor in being the battlefield healer, that the person that takes care of the warriors. And although you might be second in this society, although you might be second class, it still may be a point of honor amongst the rest of the population that may be below you. And being able to learn how to fight might be the only way to come up from the bottom level of society. So this might be very much a meritocracy. If you're a lowly, ditch digger, and you practice with your wooden sword in the woods or something, and some great warrior finds you or what have you, you and or your family may be pulled up from the bottom ranks. So
yeah, maybe there's some kind of formalic duel system where you defeat someone, you can increase your rank. So basically the people at the top always have to fight off potential enemies who would take their rank.
Yeah. Now let me go into a little bit of the gaming mechanics, and because we've already started breaking apart what a fighter is, but I'm going to just dive into a little bit of the gaming mechanics and how I feel it would reflect in the world. So the three things that I feel like fighters have are and one of them is a limitation. Okay, so the one thing fighters are known for is basically obtaining a fighting style. And we already established that there would be these fighting schools. Depending on how the school is run, some of them may be mercenary-like. So, for example, they might have this push and pull against the society around them, like, hey, you need to abide by what we want, or we'll just leave. Right, we won't protect you unless you give us what we want, and that would be extremely mercenary, right? You know that someone's getting ravaged in the countryside, and they're just like, "You haven't paid us this month, so we're not going to go." Whereas on the more honorable sides, like what we consider, like from the movie 300, the Spartans, all they would consider all their population to encompass their fighting style. And in return, they give their souls to the people, right? We'll die for you. It doesn't matter, as long as you give your firstborn to us. And looking at the movie 300, some of those children were like killed. Newborns were killed and thrown over a cliff. We forget to see, look at that part of it. They weren't necessarily culturally today. We wouldn't look at them as heroes so much, but there was quite a bit of that as well. It's warriors being killed before they even reached of age and such. But something else that fighters have.
The society was pretty fucked up from the Spartans. Some things may even contributed to their downfall. They separated men and women pretty strictly, for example, and stuff like that. So yeah.
And I think a lot of that would be playing with that in this world would be great, right? I believe there would probably be a razor's edge between looking at each fighting house as being both the hero and the villain of their own story. Just using like the 300 movie as an example, because I'm not very familiar with the actual historical Spartans. From their point of view, they're the heroes, right? You watch the movie, they're the heroes, and we kind of gloss over the negatives in their society. Whereas from the outside, you could say, well, wait a minute, they're giving over their newborns and tossing them over cliffs and being extremely brutal to, and then there's such class stratification. Like, why are they the heroes? So I could see there would be these fighting schools where children are taken into battle, where people might be harmed or mutilated during their training process to get up to get to a fighting style, or people who are told to never retreat in battle, knowing that they're going to die, instead of being given help in battle and such. So, but
Yeah.
one thing fighters mechanically do not have amongst some of the other character classes are a lot of skills. They don't start out with a lot of skill bonuses to be very skillful. And I think this is where what you mentioned about society built around them, I think this is where our other classes come into effect, and other places in society to support the fighters. I think everything in society would revolve around supporting the warriors and these fighters to either defend themselves or expand territory, or to put down threats. Everything from clerics to wizards to all the warlocks, it doesn't matter. I think all of that would serve the fighting class. And the few, you might have a society where up to 80 to 90% of the class types would be fighter, and then everybody else would be in no more than a handful of individuals together. I believe your religious classes would bless warriors. They might go into battle with them. Maybe
They could have warcasters and stuff like that. You could
But
also, again, what I say basically every time we're talking about this specific topic, multi-classing. So there could still be fighters who multi-class into other classes, or maybe take specific archetypes, because there are, for example, arcane archers, there are
and
sharpshooters, there are those
the
eldritch knights,
Eldritch
which
Knight.
can cast some spells and stuff. So even fighters have a huge variety on themselves.
Absolutely. And I'm getting, I guess, because we're world building with fighters in mind, the idea of like you're saying, like warcasters and such, that it could be that many fighters are very tactical. So having like one person's idea might say, well, if I'm one of the few, I'm only one of 10,000 that's a wizard, I could just cast a fireball and I dominate this world or something. But remember,
not if there are like 100 highly trained soldiers on the other side with longbows.
Exactly. And no one's saying that they're going out like lining up in these, nice efficient rows fighting each other. I guarantee you those snipers, those archers and crossbowmen, blow dart men or what, and ladies, they're going to take your wizard out when he's, taking a crap, right? They're not going to allow or fight forward in the open against someone who's a powerful caster. And in this world, why would a powerful caster put themselves in a position to be killed that way? If you have
you're
this
far
great,
too valuable otherwise. I think you would basically be a buffing machine for the fighters most of the time.
right,
Just focusing on mass buffing instead of just throwing fireballs somewhere. Even if they had societies where wizards were used that way, the enemies would adapt in some way. Maybe taking classes where they get the evasion ability and then spread up. And there are tons of different things you could try to do. And maybe there are magic items which prevent them from taking too much damage from these kinds of spells. There are workarounds. So
right.
it's not like they would be helpless against mages. If you play D&D for a while, you know mages are powerful, but they are also fragile as hell. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and remember, we're talking fighters here of gaming wise, all alignments. They come from every parts of the world. There's nothing saying that they have to fight honorably. The idea of, I mean, yes, in our movies we love to see them all lined up and chanting to the atypical speech of we're going to be immortal or give of our lives and blah blah blah, as the hero gets them. Although I've never understood how everyone practice, slamming their spears into the ground and knocking on their shields in unison. I don't know how that happens.
Yes.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
The Spartans even learned how to be witty. That was part of their training. There's a famous story when a giant warlord wrote a letter to one of the Spartan kings and said, if I come into your country, I will rape your women and I will burn down your cities and whatever. And the Spartan king did send one word back, if.
I like that.
That's a historic story. So yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah, in this world of battle and fighting, now mind you, there could be conflict there, right? Where some great warrior nations are very honorable, and others are like they're pure bastards, right? They are the equivalent of assassins and backstabbers and such. And this is where like the one rogue in a group of 12 fighters would, penetrate someone's kingdom, being, led into the back door and killing people or poisoning them, bribing individuals, threats. So sure, other character classes would shine because of their uniqueness, but in many ways, like you said, they're going to buff to protect themselves.
They basically will be support to the fighters in one way or another. Even if you have a very good rogue, you can't usually one-shot a fighter from backstabbing. That's mechanically speaking, that's super duper hard. And when you don't, you're fucked because you don't have the advantage anymore. You don't get sneak attack anymore. And now he can just fucking murder you.
Right. So the in this world, like you said, there's support service. So a rogue would probably be highly used as like spies, scouts. They're extremely skilled, so they would maybe
maybe
make traps.
Commando units to take down important targets or something.
Mm-hmm. And all of these other character classes that are highly skilled in their own their own techniques would be support service just for knowledge for fighters. Hey, we're going up against we're going up against archers and they have ballista. What should we do? And then they talk to their specialists. Listen, here's a good way to maneuver around their fighting styles, or historically, let's pull the books out with their historical fighting styles, and this is how they were defeated in the battle of so and so. And okay, and so I think a lot of that would happen. Wizards would give them arcane knowledge. Rogues would give them knowledge to get around traps and obstacles, battlefield obstacles. Clerics would give them religious buffs. Here's a blessing from the gods. Go on your way. I'm going to stay back home. And the other character classes as well, whether there are sorcerers and such that would just be in society, but not necessarily on the front lines, not if they could help it. And to shrink our world down a little bit in terms of interactions, I can imagine despite the fact that fighters love the fight and there would be lots of fighting, I think there would be lots of social interaction during fights. Basically, stick measurements, whether it's barroom brawls, whether they're tournaments.
I was thinking about these old idea of that you visiting other fighting schools, and if you beat their master, you get their plague. You get an something from them to show that you beat them. So basically, the principle you have from Pokemon is stolen from there. There are people who just collect these things to show off how good of a fighter they are. And maybe the whole thing about a campaign is getting a certain number of these badges, and then you are allowed to do X, or maybe you have to compete in a giant tournament with a huge arena. Oh, that would also be something really cool. The giant arena, something like the Colosseum, where you could do giant fights inside for entertainment.
Yeah, the idea of, I think the two would be not just combined, but they have their purpose. So, for example, the fighting, like, let's go with the classic fighting pits gladiatorial arena. With so many fighters, they would not want to waste their talent. So criminals, political dissidents, enemies, they could learn so much from putting enemies in fighting pits to maybe learn from other fighting styles while at the same time punishing them. And those who are lower in status in society, because society still has to go on. People still have their lives. They're farmers and they create businesses, and there's merchants and guilds and things. And so criminals could be put into these fighting pits. And if they show their prowess, that might be how society kind of forgives, or you can make reparations for your crimes. Oh, I was a thief. I had two choices: get a hand cut off and go back to my life, or join the fighting pits, and I could show my worth and then maybe get recruited into the military or something. And then
get a champion in the arena.
Right. And fortunately/unfortunately, some people might be quite horrible in their personal lives. They could be, abusers, rapists, liars, cheats, but they show great promise in fighting. So it's like, we're going to release them and put them on the front lines because they're so useful. And so that could be a thing. And with the fighting pits also, this like I said, this allows them to see some of their enemies' combat abilities. Like
Yeah,
it may be a point of
getting up a bunch of different fighting styles in one pit and then see who wins. And basically, that's a huge crave currently on YouTube. Who wins death battles and shit like that, and it's nothing else in the past. Also, you could have huge missions for capturing monsters to fight in these arenas.
Mhm.
That's also a huge thing. And what I heard in about the Colosseum, which is basically the coolest thing ever, sometimes they flooded the thing and made sea battles in it.
You know what? I heard that, and I would have loved to see what that looks like because that just sounds awesome. Like, I mean, today, could we do something like that? Sure, right? But I, I think the undertaking of like having a giant coliseum with like ships in it and flooding it with water, even if it's not that deep, you know what I mean? But just having that would just be awesome. And who's to say that some of our adversarial creatures aren't part of this fighting world as well? The giant who the the semi-intelligent, two intelligent creatures that know about great warriors and great fighting houses, and their purpose is to take out or fight some of these great warriors or great fighting houses, and people want to see that, right? It's the giants that are like, Dragor the Great Axeman or whatever killed my great grandfather, and I'm here to challenge, his sons and destroy his bloodline or something. And the fighters are like, yeah, we want to see this. Like, let's go, let's do this. Let's put them in the Coliseum. Let's surround them in a field in the outside of our city and see them go, do battle with each other or something.
I mean, the Colosseum could basically be the center of our world. That this is how the big conflicts are resolved. And you have so for example, if one state fights the other, you could have just, okay, there are two champions or there are two two groups of elite warriors fight each other in the arena in this special configuration, and then we see which nation wins.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's focused on smaller brawls instead of just giant wars all the time, which D&D, to be honest, isn't that good in. So you could basically reshape the focus into something that D&D does really well, which is small skirmishes.
Yeah, and strangely enough, for a world consumed with battle, in the rules, it says that if you drop an enemy to 0 hit points, you can decide to knock them out or disable them, basically, instead of kill them. And it may be a point of contention, like when you have these fights with enemies, that really the fight is just to see who's the best, right? When you take them to 0 hit points, they concede, or they're knocked unconscious, or they're wounded enough that they can't fight any longer. And this could prove the people that live in this society can't see these great battles, but reenacting those great battles, they can see. And so instead of 10,000 soldiers fighting another 5,000 that are entrenched, they get to see, Dragar the Bold fight off, 12 enemies. And then when Dragar wins, they're like, oh, wow, now we understand how great this individual is. And society may be built around, this might be a heavy reputation world. So winning these tournaments, winning these battles, it's not about killing the other opponent. It's about being better than them.
Yeah.
And that in itself might be a thing. I'm the better archer.
It used to be that way in history too, because training a good fighter is just a huge investment in time and money and energy and stuff, and just killing them off regularly wouldn't go well with the people who do these things, because they wouldn't be able to sustain it for long. Also, I thought about maybe there are some kinds of different arenas in this giant city, so you could basically have different fighting environments, or you could just have to fight your way up to the huge arena.
And that makes it, and speaking mechanically, that could be how you have so-called higher level fighters, right? So if you could have these smaller, they might not even be arenas, they might just be a dirt pit somewhere in the lower echelons of the city, but you get to move on. Or there are scouts, talent scouts, who are watching for people who have great talent. Or maybe these smaller schools only have 10 students, but these the higher echelon scouts are like, oh, these 10 students, I want to pick those 3. They're coming with me. And at each level, they're getting recruited and moved up, either because this is the way the system works and it's very public, or it could be underhanded, like people are like stealing talent from other people through coin or bribery or threats. And as these fighters move up, they're gaining more talent. Dead Man the Storyteller brings up the Hound in Game of Thrones, and in many ways, like attorney, when your warriors go into the tournaments or maybe these fighting pits or what have you, they carry with them a representation of the other nation, right? How they dress, how they act, their fighting style, how much money comes along with them. How grand is your tournament versus everyone else? Like how much food, how much pomp and circumstance is given out.
Yeah. I just remembered this fight from the mountain against the oh man, I had the name right now. The spear guy.
Yes.
The Viper.
Sand Snake or Oberon?
Oberon, yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. The fight between these 2 guys, because they were super different, but it was still an interesting fight, and they had could represent where they came from pretty accurately.
Yeah, and by the way, Game of Thrones, that's how they settled some legal disputes, right? I pick, a challenge. Hey, am I innocent or guilty? Well, we're going to find out with a fight.
Trial by combat.
Trial by combat. And hey, if you win, you're innocent. Hey, I don't go to, I'm not imprisoned or anything. If I lose, I'm guilty. And not exactly the most just method, but some would say, hey, if you win, lose, doesn't matter. Those them the rules, right?
This is maybe just a measurement. It used to be a measurement to protect the better fighters. So basically survival of the fittest. So if you're a good fighter, then you are worthy to survive, to go on.
And considering trial by combat, maybe to get justice. Like, for example, the Mountain is in the Game of Thrones is a brutal child rapist, right? I mean, it just deserves to be killed, despite as powerful and as such a warrior. Maybe to enact justice in this world, especially for the little guy, there could be a warrior class that is nothing but enforcers. So instead of like guards, not instead of, but in addition to guards and investigators and trials and things, there may be just a class of warriors whose only job is to go after other fighters to bring them to justice. And if that means just cutting off their heads and bringing back their weapon, that might just be it. And
Judge Dredd.
Yeah. They could be not a secondary class of people, but a class of individual that doesn't fit into the
normal class structure. They are basically a judge and jury, as Judge Dredd would say. So they have special privileges because of their special position. Right.
And how imagine like the idea of the executioner's hood. It's so iconic. Maybe they dress, or they have a banner, or they wear a certain color, or an armband, or they use a certain weapon, or even fighting style, and they're known to travel around. And of course, they might be singular, or maybe just travel like maybe no more than a group of 3, and then they have like a small entourage with them. And when they go into these cities, they could say, hey, listen, they show their paperwork or what have you. We're going after, they name someone, a holy knight, a great warrior or something. And everyone's just like, they open the gates like, okay, if you want to, you can come on in. We're going to stay out of this fight. And that could be a thing where they go to enact revenge, justice. They bring justice to whatever crime they committed wherever they were, and whether they're paid by coin, maybe there's a, like, how do I say this? If a commoner comes to them to bring them justice, maybe the penalty is, if you are lying, we will come and kill you. Right? If you enact them, you are under the blade. As not only are they acting in your hand and they become a blade for you, the reverse is that they can come after you if somehow you deceive them or manipulated them or something, and no one wants to be on the receiving end of their justice. And so that could be that could be something as well, where some of these multi-classed fighters might go into this field, or
I also have an idea.
Okay.
Catching monsters for the arena. That could be a huge privileges stop, where you have huge groups of people with nets and poison and whatever to subdue these monsters and get them into the city. There had to be a steady stream of these things, and that would be also a pretty cool thing you could do with a group.
It's very, you don't often have an adventure where the adventure is bring back the creatures you fought to be put into like the arena or the zoo or something for battle later, whether they're like animalistic things, like bring back with a wyvern or wyvern or whatever you want to call them, or bring back the giant insects or something like that. Right?
X would be pretty valuable. Monster X.
And of course Deadman says, because this might be part of these arenas. He says that in real life it was in Rome. In real life it was in Rome, and the water was about 15 feet deep, and that's talking about flooding these coliseums. So you could have, say, a magical coliseum that allows people to fight in the coliseum that represents the environment that these creatures were captured in. So the people get to see
illusions, or maybe there is actually something like a portal, or just the arenas just shows a different place.
I've always thought it would be amazing to see like an ice flow in an arena, and the ice flows towards the edge of the arena and just flows through the walls. So in the arena, it's like freezing cold and it's like frozen water, and they're fighting on these like slippery ice things, but the people around it are just completely comfortable. And there's no, if you were sitting in the arena, you could reach your hand out into the cold air and just be like frozen. But when you come back, you're just in like your robes or something. And you
could do so crazy shit. You could do something like underwater fights. You could basically flood the whole arena and give everyone the ability to breathe underwater. You could have give everyone the flight ability and have the whole thing lifted up into the clouds. There could be some crazy shit.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't even touch upon mounted combat, on flying mounts, mounted combat, and fighting other nations. But even in these arenas, there was an old video game called Joust. You fought on like, I don't know, they were like ostriches or something, little birds with lances. In role-playing games, we very rarely see the lance fight. Like, why would you have a lance? That's only good for charging on horseback. But you could have this in an arena where everyone's got a lance and maybe a couple of like small weapons, and they're like flying through the air, lancing each other or fighting.
Lances
like
are actually pretty strong, even in D&D, I think. The problem is that the horse is usually too large. But there are workarounds. I've seen builds where people play halflings or gnomes, which their horses are as medium-sized, so you could still do all the shenanigans with the lance and stuff to charge at the enemies and do like double or triple damage or whatever. There are some weird things you can do.
But I mean, isn't that part of like classic literature of the image of the knight with the lance charging towards some giant or beast or dragon or something like that. I mean, that would just be reenacted in these arenas. And who's to say that they aren't being used out in the wilderness as well? Um, it, it seems that since there's such a huge fighting class, that either they're constantly fighting over territory with each other, or or there are enough enemies out there that it requires having a large fighting class to send people out to fight them, for whatever reason there is. And I'm thinking that the creatures and humanoids that they fight in the outer regions, whether they're like gnolls or dragons or giants or something, that society has built so many of these fighting cities that they're encroaching on their territory. And that's what's happening. That all of these nations, it's like us encroaching on the wildlife area. We're just humanity is taking up so much territory, there's nowhere for them to go. So there's constant friction against the fighting nations. And that's what's happening. And of course, as humanity is wont to do, we're just ignoring the fact that this is happening. We're ignoring the side effect of what we're doing. We're solving it by just having more fights, right? Instead of going, well, maybe we shouldn't be encroaching on the mountain territory with the mountain dwarves and the giants that live there and the stone giants or whatever. It's like, no, we need those resources. The fact that they're fighting us, we need more fighters to defend ourselves.
That's the problem. When you are based on war, you have to have war all the time. That's one thing I learned. The USA also has a bit of this problem, because there's so much investment in the military that you constantly have to have war to gain something out of it. It's a weird dynamic, because you can't really stop, because you would have shown you would need to back down all these institutions which are already established. You would need a huge change, and that's basically the same thing. If you invest like 60-70% of your total income of the nation on your military, then you better have something to fight.
Exactly. And it could be that this fighting pit economy is feeding itself, right? So society's built around fighting schools. The fighting schools expand. So in order for the fighting schools to expand, you have to expand your territory to maintain society, to maintain this military front. And then in return, it's causing conflict and battle. So now you have a reason to have these fighting forces. And it's just like the cyclical thing of like going out, capturing people, enslaving them, bringing them back to the fighting pits to get rid of your adversaries on your outer borders, to bring them into your inner borders, to show people why you have a fighting force. And then the people were like, oh, that's why you're taxing us to fight the giants. Great, here's some more money to increase your fighting force. And the giants are like, wait a minute, how about we just stop for a minute? Yes, absolutely. There's a reason why the United States has a large military, and the reason for having it is to use it. Backwards thinking, but yes, most people feel like if you invest in something, you better use it or find a reason why you don't need it. And most people who invest in something find a reason to use it. It's why, sorry, ladies, it's why $900 high heel shoes are worn. It's like, if they hurt my feet, then don't wear them. But I spent $900. I'm not giving them away. I'm going to, force my feet in them. And guys, it's like, putting more money into an old car, right? You should get rid of that thing. But I put twice as much money as it's worth in it. I'm not getting rid of this car.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I recently learned that men actually waste more money on luxury goods than women.
Mm-hmm.
And by a good margin, I think like 20% more or something, just because they have cars and expensive suits and shit like that. And men kind of have to show off.
Yep. Yeah. Why did I buy all that stuff to to improve my computer because I bought the computer in the first place, right? I'm not going to throw it out. I'm going to spend a ton of money to, increase it to its maximum until I just can't increase it anymore. It becomes outdated, and then I'll invest in a new one. And by the way, I'm going to spend far too much money to get a new one, and then the whole cycle starts all over again, right? It's what we do. You know what I mean? It's a thing, and this
I mean,
this society.
you also could have huge projects. I just remembered there's a thing going on in America currently about a wall or something. Maybe there's something like that too. Maybe you have to build a giant wall to protect against the giants or whatever. And
Yep.
you have to protect this thing all the while this thing is built and get materials and shit like that.
Hey, the building of walls is not a unique thing. It's been done plenty of times. We've got a lot of examples. The US, we've got one here. China has one. There's Hadrian's
You don't
Wall.
have to tell us about walls,
Germany,
okay?
It's a thing. Hey, I wasn't going to bring that one up, but you understand what I'm saying though, right? The idea of a wall is not new. And okay, how can I say this without okay, I'm going to have to say it and be rude at the same time. In this fighting class, maybe some ideas are just plain simple and sometimes stupid, right? Game-wise, fighters don't have a lot of skills, and sometimes they have to rely on people who have those skills. But those people who are far more educated are a single voice amongst thousands who are like, me hit, me strike, me dodge, right? So maybe a lot of these solutions to these problems are like hammer and nail. It's we fight, so we're going to come up with a fighting solution. But the people who are more brilliant, the bards who are like, maybe we should just talk to them and just make a deal with them, maybe some trade. Your voice may not be loud enough to be heard until you get some of the higher echelon warriors who are like, maybe I should listen to my war council in this one.
Interestingly enough, most warrior nations used to be highly educated too, because they had the time and reason to study these things. As I said, the Spartans were very witty. They had to study a lot of things. They had to study philosophy and similar things to be able to stand up in a battle of words, so to speak. That was their main reason, and they should also be highly educated in tactics, and they would choose their few skills that they have very, very carefully.
And that could be dead man is storyteller. Yeah. That could be a measurement of, as we mentioned before, about like having this reputation economy of sorts that although we would think that every problem can be solved by hitting it, there would have to be times when you can't do that. And so a measure of the ability of your fighters could be how skilled are they when there's in their non-combat abilities. So like you said, Spartans were very educated. We can absolutely go with the samurai culture, where many of them were skilled in air quotes softer arts, poetry, dance, flower arranging, haiku, poetry, maybe some public speaking. We can come up with other.
The samurai class was basically something like fighters,
right? And in this gaming world, the rare fighters who rise above would be the other archetypes, like the arcane archetypes, and maybe some of the fighter multi-classing, where you have this realm of samurai fighters, and then a few may become paladins, a few might become mixed with like rogue, a few might be arcane eldritch knights and things of that nature. What is it? Arcane archers, that kind of thing. So you might have a few that might rise above and beyond. And some of them, if they live long enough, might become legendary warriors. The warrior who went into battle and drew his flaming sword, or the warrior that went into battle and was a great archer and, fired an arrow from a mile away and hit the other warlord in the eye or something. Those might become legend. And language may revolve around these battles. So as fighters are fighting each other, someone may say something like, "Oh, you fight in the style of the 12th Legion," and someone, the other person's fighting, and it's like, "I was never in the 12th Legion, but I learned from the great warrior, Drogus, who was in the 12th Legion." And he's like, "Oh, you did learn from Drogus. My great nephew learned from him. It's a shame that he became, he left our fighting school to go with them. We considered him a traitor, but he was a great warrior. And so, our fighting school honored him, yet we were destined to murder him for leaving us," or something. Like, you could have these, how do I say that? You could have combat with interaction, giving and taking of information in these fights, if everyone has buy-in into it, so that between the die rolls, instead of everyone getting top-headed, like, "Oh, roll initiative, let's fight," you could have these conversations in battle with your enemy, and then that kind of builds your world out about these historic fights, or about a great enemy that might be coming over the horizon, or the enemy of my enemy is my friend situations as well. $10,000 would get you the best parts for a computer. Sure will, till it gets too old, and I'm gonna spend another 10 grand to do it again. Because that's the cycle. Don't you solve my vices. But what else is there? We did talk about the adversaries and some of the other classes or other class types, and it could, when you were talking about multi-classing, some of these fighting houses, whether they're considered like royalty or nations or something, some of the fighting styles may be multi-classing in and of itself. So the fighter rogues might be its own fighting style. So there might not be a split between, culturally, there might not be a split between fighter and rogue. It could be this school teaches fighting, but if you get to a certain level, then they give you these other talents, like the roguish skills. So maybe these fighters are known to fight with a long sword, but they carry like 3 daggers behind their back or something. Or they're known to fight.
There are tons of possibilities. I think this would also be a world where multi-classing would be basically the main thing about getting other classes, because even in normal D&D, there are a lot of people who advocate that 1 to 3 levels of fighter never hurts. Not really taking into account what other class you want to take, because it's a solid base to base your character on, to have all the weapons you could use, to have some good stat bonuses, to maybe specialize on a specific weapon and stuff like that. And later, then you can start your other classes.
Yeah. And in this world, maybe that's the goal, but you just have to live long enough, right? To get 2 or 3 levels of fighter, to get those action surges, to get that second wind, you need that to live in this world. And then you can start learning and branching out to these other things. If you have enough prestige, money, power, you're surrounded by enough other warriors to defend yourself, so you have enough downtime, I guess, or you're able to beseech some of these specialized schools, or maybe there's a specific teacher to teach you the rogue type skills or wizarding skills, or to be pulled into the church to be taught some of these higher level things. But you have to prove yourself as a warrior, whether in, on a battlefield. Patchwork Gray says, counting coup. You get a lot of bragging rights by beating someone with an inferior weapon, or just letting them have the first hit. Bragging rights matter to fighters, and that's true of barbarians too. And that could be a thing as well.
Come on, you can have the first hit.
Yep. Or we're going to fight. And so someone says, where do we fight? So you pick a location, right? Or a certain fighting pit. And then someone says, what time? They pick the time, and then they say, what weapon? Right? None, or a wooden stick, or spears, or something. And it would be funny, not funny, but like the greatest spearman gains more honor by saying, we're going to fight with daggers. And everyone's like, ooh, daggers? He's known as the silver spear. And maybe his spear, like the great warriors keep their weapons, they're held by like their squires or something on the side, like as if to say, yeah, I can beat you with that, but I'm going to hold that off on the side for a moment. And
you could also have something like a very renowned fighter, and when you want to bring him to a duel, and you are packing your longsword and your shield, and he's like, okay, and picks out his dagger, just to humiliate you.
Ooh, wow. You mentioned training to be witty, which was like that was a Viking thing too, like being able to put someone down, like to shape these elaborate stories to embarrass the other person. And what if this happened in the show Spartacus? The great show, four seasons, great show. You got to watch it, guys. Netflix, whatever. Okay, enough plugging of Spartacus. But one of the things was the heads of the luduses, were bragging to each other, and one of them said, "Well, my gladiators are better. He could fight with his eyes closed." And the other guy's like, "Oh, really? Let's bring out your gladiators." And then they brought out a blindfold. And he was just like, Ludi. Thank you very much, Patchwork. And so the heads of the Ludi said, well, okay, if you think your gladiator can fight with his eyes closed, here's a blindfold. Let's see what happens. And the other gladiator's like, wait, what? Wait, you really want me to fight with like a blindfold on against this other guy? Like you're freaking insane. But that's the culture. So he did fight with a blindfold. He actually defeated the guy. But my point being is that you could have these bragging threats going on. Oh, gotta say goodbye, baby.
Good night. Good day. I love you.
Love you, baby. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There could be very much this idea of having like giving yourself limitations, or someone maneuvering you into putting these limitations on you and conniving it, and the crowd or the people or the officials around you are like looking at you like, okay, are you really going to fight with this dagger, knowing this person you fight with a shield and sword? Are you going to back down? Are you a coward? And that could be a real well, I was going to say game changer, right?
I remember the scene from One Piece. I'm not sure if you've seen it. There's this one character called Zoro, which he wants to be the best swordsman in the world. And very early in the story, he meets the actual best sword master in the world. And he's basically like the absolute fucking badass. He could slice a giant ship in half with his sword and stuff like that. And because of his honor, this guy who's basically like the equivalent of maybe level 5 or something in D&D challenges this level 20 guy. And the level 20 guy is seriously going with the dagger against the 3 swords the Zoro uses, and he absolutely demolishes him. But he keeps him alive because he said he has potential. And he destroyed 2 of his swords. He made 2 huge scars across his body. And that's what remained after this fight. And it was pretty epic, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's awesome. And in addition to these like fighting schools, like we've really talked about like an organized cultural method of this tiered system of people rising and going. But I can imagine that there would be this like lone wolf and cub society as well. These hermits who are like great warriors, or the wandering like gunslingers, right? These people who are wandering around being the best warriors, challenging individuals. Some of them might be legendary, like the I don't know, the retired bearded swordsman who comes out of the woods, every 3 seasons or something down into the city, and everyone's just like, "Ooh, it's so and so." He's like barefoot with like just a burlap sack around his body and his like golden sword or something, and everyone wants to know if he's going to be challenged or not, and how much honor you can have to challenge him or even be killed by them. There might be a lot of that too, where even if you're killed by a great warrior, your family may gain a lot of honor, or maybe your name is given honor, and that in itself kind of rises you and other people related to you up into a higher status as well.
Maybe your gym simply. I would even say that that's something like getting defeated from them without getting killed may give you a lot of XP. Even just as an incentive to try to fight these guys. Maybe you can only unlock certain feats or subclasses or whatever if you ever fought someone who had this style.
Right. Well, the pure description of experience points is experience, right? We learn more from our failures than our successes. It's
which is something D&D usually does pretty bad.
Exactly. It's like, oh, you don't gain experience unless you kill the other thing. Like, no, I would absolutely positively give out experience by having the experiences, right? It's the classic movie Rocky. The very first Rocky movie, he loses, and his only point was, I just want to fight just to show my manhood, right? I just want to be on my feet. That's all. I know I'm not going to win. I just want to show my best. And maybe that can lift you up societally just by being on the battlefield or being in the fighting pits or just standing up to it. Maybe great enemy is like, you know what? You could have backed off. You could have ran. You could have left. But you stood by after your master died and was taken out, you stood over his body. You took 3 arrows into the chest, and there's nothing you can do, right? I'm going to not only let you live, I'm going to take you back home and make sure you get, medical care or something. Or I'm going to make sure you get back to your family, and maybe this other great nation or something with their great warriors is like, he put up a good fight. Honor him. We'll come back. He'll have his chance to get revenge on me, but for right now, let's make sure he gets enough so he comes back to full health.
Yeah.
And that is a strange thing, but if you get player buy-in, like to fight, imagine fighting an enemy and then letting them live to fight them again. That would be I know a majority of player characters are not going to want that to happen, but imagine like if you're able to gain certain boons. Okay, I'm going to really stretch this out here. Instead of gaining scrolls and spells, not spell slots, but like magic items, potions and things, which would exist in this world, magic weapons, maybe fighters are you can grant boons to certain people if they do things that's far above and beyond the most pragmatic thing to do.
Yeah, maybe there could be different things. You could maybe gain magic tattoos, which work like these things. Or even better, you could get titles, which you can use in combat. I stood up to this huge mountain of an enemy, and now I can cast Enlarge myself once a week or whatever.
Yeah. Game of Thrones, Daenerys, Stormborn, Breaker of Chains, like this long list of titles you earn through battle. And when other people refer to you that way, and that becomes your boon, like your special ability, even if it's used once or multiple times, right? You could gain temporarily, like maybe temporarily you gain a Barbarian's Rage. Right? It's a thing that you can do, or it's granted to you, or like you said, you're given a tattoos, or maybe a banner is designed for you that you carry into battle, and carrying that banner.
There's also sorry, huh?
No.
I was just thinking about one thing we absolutely missed is legendary weapons. And I just remembered Tiger and Dragon, the old movie with the green sword of the underworld, which is like a really cool thing because fighters are really focused on their weapons. In Dungeon World, they're even defined by their signature weapon. So something like obtaining a special weapon could be a huge honor too, which even increases maybe your fighting abilities beyond just getting a few stat boosts.
Excalibur is the epitome of the classic trying to achieve the magic weapon. And so maybe there is a legendary place a weapon is placed, or if you fight in these battles, these pits, gladiatorial arenas, maybe there is a weapon that you obtain and you hand it over to the next person that defeats you. Or if you fall in battle, that weapon is then placed at the highest peak of a mountain or something, and someone has to go and obtain it, and you're given a lot of honor if you obtain it.
Or you could inherit a weapon from your forefathers, and you have to learn how to use it properly to unlock its abilities.
Absolutely. I love the idea of a magic weapon that grows with you. I know this is a 4th edition thing, but I would absolutely let that happen in a game. You know, you're a first level fighter, you gain a +1 sword. And then later on, your ancestral sword, you get the 3rd level or something, or 4th level. And now it's a sword of lycanthrope slaying or something, or giant slaying, or, you know, it's a frost brand or something, right? Like, you not just attune to it mechanically, but you attune to it walking in the footsteps of your forefathers. You could even, why there's nothing limiting us from having a strict fighter class that has a magical background, right? So what I mean by that is you could reskin your second wind or action surges as being from a magical background. So your second wind could be one of your ancestors telling you to get the hell up after being knocked down or something, right? I'm too tired, you know, Father, I can't do this anymore. And then in your mind, you see a spirit or something like that. It's like, I taught you better than that. You know, these people will overrun this world, or you can't dare fall in battle or something, or whatever. Or your mom is just like, you know, son, I believe in you, or whatever. And then he gets back up and starts to fight again, or what have you.
I just remembered again something from the Dark Eye. There are from the 12 churches, which are told already, again, there are 12 gods. And each of these gods has a relic weapon, which you can sometimes get by doing something pretty awesome for the specific god. So, for example, if you're protecting a huge temple which is full of children or whatever, you could suddenly get the Sword of Rondra to defend it. And something like that would be pretty awesome if the huge fighting schools had their signature weapon somewhere, which you can't use unless the weapon wants you to.
That sounds awesome too. And who's to say, like, your wizards or something aren't enchanting items, but they only work within the castle grounds or the city limits or on the walls of the, you know what I mean? Like, it could be a weapon that is limited to defense of a particular region, or, like you said, only used. It's the dragon slaying sword.
You can call it to you, but you'd never know if it would come.
Right. The dragons attack again after its 10-year sleep, and then suddenly one of the warriors on the ground, the dragon slaying sword gets summoned into his hand, but he just does. It's just automatic. Like, it's like, what the hell? And they're like, he's got the sword of, you know, Black Death or something, and then he starts like fighting the dragon, and then at the end of the fight, the sword disappears. Something here, Patchwork Gray says, he or she says, we had a system where magic items happen by crits, score a crit, and the weapon, armor, or something you have gets a permanent upgrade. And I could imagine a crit, and both mechanically and or something dynamic that happens in a battle becomes the bonus that character receives. So what I mean is, the story spreads like David and Goliath. I destroyed the Goliath by taking my sling stone and smacking him in his head, right? And then that becomes a story. So maybe crits in your game mechanically, or critical things that happen in the world, whether it's by narrative purpose, becomes the thing you're known for. So if the fighter trips the giant and takes the giant out, he becomes Jack the Giant Slayer, right? So now you gain a boon of slaying giants. You gain a bonus on damage, or some ability to dodge them, or maybe temporarily you gain temporary hit points when you fight giants. And that could be the legend that follows your name as you gain levels and or ranks or notoriety or something. Yeah, that would be pretty interesting. So yeah, we're going on a little long. I do have to go to work. Sorry, guys. That's why those of you who I'm speaking to, those who miss these live broadcasts, I get up earlier before I go to work because I am up at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, my time. So, to be at work by 8 or so. I live pretty close to work, but still got to go. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me. We're going to continue this on. Vince, of course, is not obligated to be here each time, but I love having his, dichotomy with me. But anyway, Vince, please take us out.
Yeah, I really like being here too. Bouncing ideas off each other is just awesome, even though we are living on different sides of this world. It's so cool being able to do that each time. But as I said already, I think 2 times or something, if someone wants to join in instead of me, I would be happy to step back, no problem. But it's really cool. And yeah, see us again with the monk, I think.
I believe monk is next. Yes.
Yeah.
We'll again, monk, kind of not stereotypical, kind of boring in a way. Many of these classes seem that way, but I think we can pull something out of the hat, right? I think we can go into it pretty deep. I have some ideas. I think we took a little bit of the monk's fire with this story, this setting.
We basically put everything into fighter now.
Yeah, but I think we can come up with something, especially if we break apart a little bit of what monks do, what they represent in the world.
Yeah, you have to go more into the inner perfection thing, and being able to better yourself and the monasteries and stuff like that. I think we can come up with something.
Yeah, and Dead Man's like mage before monk. Well, actually, it's wizard, so they're last.
Wizards, yeah, wizards are actually
not
last.
Yeah, or magic users. Yeah, I come from that era. Yes, magic users. So anyway, guys,
just fighters and magic users, nothing else.
Yep, exactly. So guys, we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining us, and have a good one.
See ya.
All right, stop.